Hello YouTube, it's Alexi, I'm back. And this is the first video essay for this channel. So the first thing I want to address is what is the future of metal? Back in 2024, Shawn Crahan made a comment about the future of metal that sparked a lot of discussion across the scene. He suggested that some of the bands rising towards headliner status simply aren't very good, and that the days of truly great music might feel like they've already passed, at least for now. When someone who helped shape modern metal says something like that, people tend to listen. Some fans immediately agreed, others strongly disagreed. But beneath that debate lies a much bigger question. What actually is the future of metal? Are we really witnessing the decline of the genre, or are we simply watching it change? To understand why this conversation exists, we have to look at how metal traditionally grew. For decades, the genre followed a fairly predictable path. Bands emerged from local scenes, they toured relentlessly, they built loyal fan bases through word of mouth. Eventually they climbed from small clubs to larger venues, and the most successful bands rose to the top of the genre. Record labels acted as gatekeepers. Festivals reinforced the hierarchy. And over time, a relatively small number of bands became the defining giants of metal. Think about the names that dominated heavy music for decades: Metallica, Iron Maiden, Slayer. These weren't just successful bands, they became pillars of the genre. They defined eras of metal. When they released albums, the entire scene paid attention. And for many fans, that era of clear, dominant headliners became the standard by which all future generations would be judged. But the truth is, metal has always evolved through cycles. In the early 90s, many people believed heavy metal itself was finished. Grunge had taken over mainstream rock. Record labels abandoned many metal bands, and yet beneath the surface, new scenes were forming. Death metal exploded across the underground. Black metal scenes emerged across Scandinavia. Metal didn't disappear, it transformed, and that cycle has repeated itself many times. Today, however, the metal landscape feels very different, and part of that difference comes from how music is discovered. The internet didn't just change how music is distributed, it fundamentally changed how audiences find new artists. In the past, discovering new metal bands was slow. Fans relied on record stores, music magazines, word of mouth, tape trading, and radio. But today, discovery happens through algorithms, Spotify playlists, YouTube recommendations, social media clips. A band can reach millions of listeners without ever touching traditional industry structures. This has created an explosion of creativity, but it has also created fragmentation. Metal no longer moves as one unified culture. Instead, it exists as dozens of different scenes evolving at the same time. And when a genre becomes this diverse, it can sometimes appear less powerful at the very top. For example, when fans look at a festival lineup today, they often expect to see the same towering names that defined previous generations, bands like Metallica, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath. When newer bands began to occupy those headliner positions, some fans questioned whether they truly belong there. But festival posters don't only reflect musical quality. They reflect audience demographics, streaming trends, and generational shifts with a fan base. So when someone like Shawn Crahan raises concerns about the future of metal, it reflects a real change in how the genre now operates. If you dig beneath the surface of that change, a very different picture begins to emerge, because the next generation of metal bands isn't weaker, it's simply more diverse, and perhaps more interesting than ever before. Take Ginger for example. The breakthrough moment came not through a traditional label campaign, but through a live video of the song Pisces that spread rapidly across the internet. Millions of viewers discovered a band blending progressive metal complexity with groove-driven heaviness, and one of the most dynamic vocal performances in modern metal. That moment didn't just introduce a band, it demonstrated how the internet has changed the pathway to success. Another example is Unprocessed. The music reflects a generation of musicians raised in the digital era. They blend technical guitar work, modern production, and emotional songwriting in ways that resonate strongly with younger audiences. Then there's artists like Poppy, who challenge the traditional boundaries of metal itself. Industrial sounds, pop influences, and heavy riffs collide to create something that feels both modern and unpredictable. Meanwhile, in the underground scene, bands like Freeze the Fall continue building passionate communities of fans through grassroots support. And technical metal remains active through bands such as Within the Ruins, who maintain a strong focus on musicianship and innovation. When we look at the bands beginning to break into larger stages, the diversity becomes even clearer. Lorna Shore have helped bring extreme metal back into mainstream awareness through their orchestral deathcore sound. The viral success of songs like To the Hellfire prove that even brutally heavy music can spread globally when amplified by the internet. Meanwhile, Fit for an Autopsy combine crushing heaviness with political and environmental themes, continuing metal's long tradition of confronting uncomfortable truths. And North Lane demonstrate how modern bands can evolve stylistically while maintaining a clear identity. These artists don't represent a single movement, they represent dozens of overlapping scenes evolving simultaneously. At first glance, it's easy to understand why someone might feel the future of metal isn't as strong as its past. The genre doesn't seem to produce the same kind of universally recognised giants it once did. The deeper you look, the more that assumption begins to unravel. Because the truth is, metal didn't become weaker, it became decentralised. In the past, metal looked like a pyramid, a handful of massive bands at the top, and thousands of smaller bands beneath them. Today, metal looks more like a web. Hundreds of interconnected scenes, artists, and fan communities. That structure may make the genre feel less dominant at the very top, but it also makes it far more diverse overall. So, was Shawn Crahan wrong? Not necessarily. The metal landscape has changed dramatically over the past 2 decades, but change doesn't always mean decline. Every generation of metal fans eventually faces the same moment. The scene they grow up with begins to evolve. New bands sound different, new audiences arrive, and the culture shifts. But that evolution is exactly what has allowed metal to survive for more than 50 years. The future of metal might not look like the past, but if the bands emerging today are any indication, the future of metal isn't fading away, it's just evolving. Thank you guys for listening. I'm Alexi, and I will see you next time.